And good Sunday morning. President Obama is on vacation. Congress is out of town. And although we are in the dog days of summer, the battle to win the hearts and minds of the American people on a range of issues is in full force. The Obama administration is finding tough opposition to its agenda, while the GOP is divided as well on how to move ahead. On Friday, President Obama announced changes to the U.S. surveillance program so many people are talking about, including a change in how the NSA collects phone records, more transparency by the Secret Foreign Intelligence Court, that's the FISA court, and the creation of a task force of private citizens. Joining me this morning, Barton Gellman of the Washington Post, who has been writing extensively about Edward Snowden and the NSA, special correspondent for NBC News, Ted Koppel, and the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Republican Congressman Michael McCaul. Barton Gellman, let me start with you. Has Edward Snowden won? Has he accomplished what he set out to do, which is to not only get a debate going, but force change in these programs?
He has accomplished far more than anyone in his position could reasonably hope to have accomplished. I mean, he told me that his greatest fear was that he would come out and do this and the whole story would be, roiling around for a day and it would be gone. I mean, now you have President Obama being forced to say that he welcomes a debate, which he welcomes sort of like the CEO who gets a really angry letter and he writes back and says, thank you for your interest in our surveillance programs. But it's top of the agenda now for 2 months.
Mm-hmm. The president spoke out about Snowden during his press conference on Friday, and he said the following.
No, I don't think Mr. Snowden was a patriot. As I said in my opening remarks, I called for a thorough review of our surveillance operations before Mr. Snowden made these leaks. I actually think we would have gotten to the same place, and we would have done so without putting at risk our national security.
Chairman McCaul, do you believe that this administration really did welcome the debate, that he would have reviewed these surveillance programs were it not for Edward Snowden?
I see no evidence of that. I think Snowden came out, leaked this information, and the White House has been backtracking ever since. I think when the story initially broke, the president went undercover. He just finally came out last Friday trying to come up with ways to salvage the program by window dressing, forming a website, for instance, an outside group. And the problem fundamentally is he's failed to explain these programs, which are lawful, which have saved lives, which have stopped terrorist plots. He has not adequately explained them or defended them. And now he's in a bit of a mess, and I'll tell you why. Because on the heels of the IRS scandal, where people don't trust this government, this administration, with their tax records, they sure don't trust this administration with their phone records. And I think that's the dilemma the president's in right now.
There is a bigger role here, Ted Koppel, in terms of public concerns about government, size of government, intrusiveness of government. But isn't the trump card on national security always what I've talked to intelligence officials about? Look, if you back away from these programs, people can die. Some of these plots that we can stop with them will get through the filter.
Look, you've got a couple of problems here. Problem number one is that you've got the almost infinite technical capability these days of finding information by intruding into people's privacy. Once you have that capability, it becomes very difficult to keep it in check. That's what the president is talking about. He's saying, trust us, we're not going to violate your constitutional rights. We're only going to dig just so far. It's unrealistic because, as you say, when lives are at stake, when security is at stake, which politician, which national leader is going to say, yeah, we have the capability of getting that information, but let's not do it?
Right. And that, to me, Chairman McCaul raises another question, and that's the issue of speed. The reason why the FISA court was set up, and Bart, you can jump in on this as well, is that if you identify a threat, you've got data to run that against to determine if there's a plot against the United States. You need a warrant and you need it fast. Government's got to act fast to apprehend those people who might be responsible. Introducing privacy advocates and others who might dissent in this process, is that realistic? You think Congress, your colleagues, are going to vote to make that happen?
Look, I'm in a unique position to talk about this. I actually applied for FISA warrants as a counterterrorism prosecutor, and I think the idea of having a public defender, when you're really, what it is a search warrant to the FISA court, which you wouldn't have in a normal criminal case, would slow down the efficacy and efficiency of our counterterrorism investigation. So I don't think that's the right way to go. I will tell you again, when I was doing this, we would run the numbers through the private phone carriers. We never really imagined that all this data would be warehoused under the NSA. And I think that's what's giving the American people a lot of pause right now. And I think that's what needs to be explained to the American people. And Congress will be reviewing this issue in Section 215 of the Patriot Act to see if this is expanded beyond the original intent of the law.
What actually changes, Barton? Do you think there's much room here to fundamentally change these programs? Because all the NSA says is, look, maybe we could change who controls this metadata, which is in this virtual vault, and who has access to it and how it's kept, which may be, not enough for those who think there's a problem.
Well, Congress may decide not to allow the NSA or via the FBI to collect every single call record of every single American for this purpose. That's not what the president's argument sounded like in his news conference. He sounded like he wanted to, as you say, just put a little more oversight on it, internal, within the executive branch, and to sort of be slightly more transparent about how it happens. His Justice Department put out a long white paper defending exactly the way it works now, and honestly, they put a lot of good, smart minds to work on it. But I think sort of 9 out of 10 civil procedure professors would have given that a less than A grade.
Ted Koppel, let's widen this out a little bit. This is against the backdrop of an ongoing war on terror, an ongoing threat, and it is reflective of a psychology of fear that you wrote about in the Wall Street Journal this week. Put a portion of what you wrote on the screen. America's chronic overreaction to terrorism, with the headline you wrote, "We have created an economy of fear, an industry of fear, a national psychology of fear. Al-Qaeda could have never achieved that on its own. We have inflicted it on ourselves."
Look, fundamentally, there are two sets of questions that apply in the war against terrorism. The one set of questions deals with the where is it going to happen, what's going to happen, when is it going to happen. The other set of questions deals with what is it that our enemy, the terrorists, are trying to achieve. What are they trying to induce us to do? Take a look at what's been happening over the past week. With a conference call, Al-Qaeda has effectively shut down 20 U.S. embassies around North Africa and the Middle East. We just had the president of Yemen here for a meeting with President Obama. He goes back feeling wonderful about his new relationship with the president. Next thing the president does is says, in effect, "Sorry, but we don't trust you Yemenis to protect our embassies," so in effect we shut down our embassy. We have an emergency evacuation. What does that do to our relationship in the rest of in the rest of North Africa? What does that do in our relationship in the Middle East? With all of these governments, the terrorists have achieved more with one phone call than we have achieved with all our response.
Chairman McCaul?
Well, listen, I think the threat's real. And what I call the narrative of the president saying that Al-Qaeda's on its heels, the struggle is over, let's go back to a pre-9/11 mentality, I think is a very dangerous narrative. I get the same threat briefings that the President of the United States does, and I'm not seeing his rhetoric meeting reality. And the fact of the matter is there is a spider web. We were just focused on Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq. This core Al-Qaeda versus non-Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda otherwhere, distinction without a difference. It's all Al-Qaeda.
But can I interrupt you, Chairman?
And it's spreading. It's getting worse, not better. And I think the American people need to know that. And I believe it's very deceptive for this president to give a narrative that it's pretty much over, when in fact what I see is a spider web throughout northern Africa, into Syria, Egypt, Pakistan, Afghanistan. This threat is getting worse, not better.
But the interruption there was your assertion about a pre-9/11 attitude. Where do you see that demonstrated by the president? The most recent example, you had 19 embassies that were closed in the face of a threat. That's what Ted Koppel is criticizing in terms of overreaction. Where is the lack of vigilance that you see that says we're in a different place mentally?
Well, I think it's a hypocrisy that he wants this rhetoric that the war is going to be over. He wants to sculpt a legacy where he is a peacemaker ending Bush's wars. With the same time, he's ramping up drone strikes. Now, I favor drone strikes, but drone strikes are not going to kill an ideology. And I think this is a war of ideology. It's going to be a long-term struggle that we all have to be very adult about. And it's going to be around for quite some time. And the threat is not getting, again, it's not getting less, it's getting worse, and we need to deal with it in a responsible way and not put our head in the sand. And I think impacting the moderate Muslim community is an effective tool that we have wholly failed to engage in.
Ted Koppel, let me come back to this idea. I mean, I think what the president would argue is that there's been a more targeted approach to dealing with terrorists, killing Osama bin Laden, and even this question of Al-Qaeda's number 2, Ayman al-Zawahiri. And he was written about in Mark Bowden's book, The Finish, the killing of Osama bin Laden. There was a meeting the president attended where he wanted more vigilance again in this fight. As Tom Donilon would tell me, Obama said, here's the deal. I want this hunt for Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri to come to the front of the line. I worry that the trail has gone cold. This has to be our top priority, and it needs leadership in the tops of our organizations. You need to ensure that we have expended every effort to take down the top leadership of Al-Qaeda, especially these 2 individuals. If you, in light of your criticism about overreaction, there is still a very specific threat and a very specific operator who is atop these organizations.
And there will continue to be a specific threat, and there will continue to be terrorism, as there has been for as long as human history exists. Terrorism is simply the weapon by which the weak engage the strong. And what they do is they cause the strong, in this case us, to overreact. We are the ones who went into Iraq and spent about $1.5 trillion doing it, losing, what, 4,500 young men and women, God knows how many tens of thousands of injured. We are the ones who have created a bureaucracy. What is TSA? TSA has about 57,000 people operating in TSA. Can you imagine a day, David, when we will ever again be without that bureaucracy?
Right.
All imposed upon ourselves.
Chairman McCaul, final word on this debate.
I would just say there's a rhetoric and a reality. And this administration has a rhetoric that's winding down. It's pre-9/11. It's a dangerous rhetoric. I think it's not good for the country. I think we have to, you can't wish this threat away as much as we hate Al-Qaeda and terrorism. But the fact of the matter is, the threat briefings I get, it's real, it exists. There's a large plot brewing in the Middle East right now, which is why they have closed these embassies. And it also could directly impact the homeland. And how irresponsible would that be for us to do nothing? And with all due respect to Mr. Koppel, but I get these briefings, and I would be derelict in my responsibility if, in light of these threat briefings that I get, to do absolutely nothing and just say that this whole thing's over and to deny it.
All right.
It is a real thing.
We're going to leave it there. Chairman McCaul, thank you very much. Barton Gelman, thank you as well. Ted, you'll be back a little later on to talk about the future of journalism, a great voice in that debate. We are back in